Hello, Ron.
Hey Dale, how you doing?
Good.
Did you get you a new truck yet?
Yeah, I did.
And you,
It wasn't what I wanted, but I did get one.
I've heard that
Do what?
vehicles are in short supply, especially used ones.
Well, that's what I got was a used one, a 2016 GMC Canyon. I didn't want four-wheel drive, and I didn't want crew cab, and I didn't want black. So what do I have? I have black crew cab, four-wheel drive. But they wanted $34,950 for it, and they let me have it for $31,000. So.
Okay. Let you have it.
Yeah.
That was nice of them.
Well, salesman, I said 30,000. He said, what's your bottom line? I said, no, that's the wrong question. You asked, what is my top line? My top line is 30,000. He said, oh, I can't go 30,000. Would you go 31? I said, no more than 31. So he walks out, and the sales manager comes in and introduces himself, and I said, yeah, you're in here trying to talk me out of more money. He said, no, I'm not. Well, yes, I am. He says, I really need 32,000. So I told him my story. He says, so you'll give us 31? I said I would. He said, sign here.
Sounds good.
It only had 41,000 miles on it.
No, that's barely broke in for
Yeah.
vehicles nowadays.
Yeah, it sure is. No.
something smells really good.
I didn't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody's lunch smells really good that was here, maybe what we had for lunch maybe? Or
Lunch?
something from outside is coming
Is
in.
there? Okay, I have, yeah.
Whatever it is.
I didn't smell it on the thing, but you smell like a sandwich of some sort, like a.
No, not a dinner or some kind of lunch.
Okay, all right.
It smells good, whatever it is. I'm always hungry.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
always hungry. Been on a diet like forever.
Watching, Dunkin' Donut open up, some of these, the visit from institutional groups, they bring in their coffee and their stuff like that, and sit there and sip it the whole time on it, just waiting for one of them bag of donuts. Cause that's what they're used to. That thing is sure tight quartered, getting in and out of there, which it looks like there's no, looks like it's a drive-through only is what
That's
it
what it
looks
looks like,
like.
yeah. Yes, I love donuts, but that's not on my diet, so.
Not mine either on it,
Too much sugar, too many carbs, etc.
I always thought that, there's lots of them down in Florida, my kids live down there, been down there a couple times, and just seem like every other corner. I always thought maybe the headquarters down there, but when we went to Maine, they're just,
Oh,
just
yeah.
thick. Their
We
headquarters
saw
up there.
Dunkin' Donuts everywhere, every
Yeah.
corner, you saw it everywhere. When we
Yeah.
went, and we noticed
Yeah.
that. We hit a few of them.
I think they looked it up, and they're headquartered Maine or Massachusetts or something like that, anyway, up there in one of the New England states, but, I don't know how they do, whether they're company owned or franchises, if they're franchises,
We
but
saw them
they do.
I know when we went to Maine, we saw them everywhere,
Uh-huh.
everywhere.
Small towns, everywhere, they're just everywhere up there, yeah.
I love donuts. I can have any donut, but I couldn't eat the rest of the day, so.
Chuck, you doing all right?
Doing fine, Ron.
Yeah.
Hello.
Getting harder and harder from here to that auditorium.
Yeah. I resemble that. Takes a lot of doctrine to keep us going.
Yeah, I gotta go for CAT scan tomorrow.
CAT scan? Well, they scanning.
Then Tuesday, I gotta go for urology checkup. 14th, I've got 2 appointments. Pat.
That's Stephanie, hi Chris.
Stephanie.
What is your work schedule change?
No, it's real slow right now,
Okay.
so.
Well, being here is much nicer.
It would be the next one. I'm getting off for decent time. Winter time, cool business.
Well, remind me where you're working.
150th Street, right to the
Say again?
200 Northeast.
How you doing?
See what, I love that.
I did, thank you.
So I was talking with her on Sunday, she never didn't even take a picture of it, because she saw it on my iPad, and so I printed it out for her.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that.
I work for, West Down the Street, I'm the warehouse manager there.
Well, warehouse manager, incoming and outgoing both. The reason I'm asking is they're talking about supply chain problems, stuff not coming in. You see any of that?
Oh, yes.
Is that right?
Oh, yes. We've got tons of stuff that's on back order right now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
One of these national news stations was these big old, intermodal, barge, outfits that were showing, I think it was California, just thousands and thousands of them sitting on the, port, ready, and they claimed that they couldn't get truckers to move out fast enough.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff that's on back order right now.
Yeah. Well, you wonder what's gonna happen when all that stuff finally comes in, they're gonna have to.
We'll be happy.
They're gonna have a big sale.
Yeah, that's what I figured, you maybe gonna have to start putting stuff on sale to move it, I don't know.
We've got big customers right now that they're waiting for parts for 6 months.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, I oversee the warehouse and, I'm the fleet manager as well.
Oh, okay.
Anything from repairs to, service to, maintenance to all kinds of stuff like that. We handle that as well.
We losing Jack and Pat?
Oh, they'll get here. We still have 4 minutes.
We got a few minutes.
I talked to Isaac today.
You did?
Yeah, he said he had an infection, a nasal infection,
Uh-huh.
and the doctor had prescribed some
Antibiotics?
antibiotics for him,
Okay.
but he still sounded real bad on the phone.
I'll make sure Arthel knows it so he can announce it tonight.
I guess, you got the word that Everett Shackelford passed.
Who?
Everett Shackelford, Keith Shackelford's father.
Oh, he passed away?
Yeah.
Oh, we need-
Well, see, they announced that Katie, both grandfathers.
Right.
In the hospital, well, one of them's Everett Shackelford. and-
But I didn't get the word, so was it sent out on email or what?
Uh,
Was it sent out on email? The,
Well, no, Taylor does this, what you call it, Facebook.
Oh.
Or what do you call the thing?
yeah, Facebook.
And she saw it on one of the, whatever,
Ah.
I don't know how you get that, but the friends thing.
Yeah.
She saw it posted.
Yeah.
One of the Shackelford youngsters on it.
Well, we'll make sure Arthel knows that too.
Yeah, I need to tell him on that.
Back.
Maybe.
Well, I'm thinking about it.
I kinda thought John would have sent out something else, cause he was one that sent out something before, but
Yeah.
maybe he didn't know.
He may not.
They make these chairs too close to the floor.
Well, you're a special height.
I agree, we need those power lift chairs.
Well, that would be nice.
Yeah,
We all want one then.
Although they recline also, that would be good. They're too comfortable.
No, if you start snoring while he's up there, he might throw things at you.
Reckon if I put in a request, they'll get one.
Massage chairs would be good too.
The what?
Massage chairs.
I thought them ones that pick up do massage.
Oh.
I can't justify paying the kind of money they got when I can still stand up, but.
Tom,
I feel the same.
I just flat skipped the question.
hey, John, you might as well get 15,
Do what?
you might as well get Deuteronomy 15, 6 through 11 up there. You'll be first.
Nah, he gonna start back there with Donald.
You're gonna start back there, Don.
It's not my time to be
Okay.
first, yeah.
It's her turn to be first, or Jack's. I don't know which side he starts,
Maybe Brother Buster.
because I got the Bible open to it, he'll start somewhere else.
Just start somewhere else. You got the Bible open for it.
All right, I'm back.
We missed you.
Well, thank you so much.
You were gone?
Yeah, that's my daughter.
You miss a toothache too, once it's fixed.
Yeah, once it's fixed.
I will not miss a toothache.
I told my dentist, I said, I'd rather take a beating than go to a dentist. He says, okay, let me go get my stick.
I would like a video.
What?
I would like a video of that.
Yeah, right.
I can see you fighting back.
I was thinking
Well-
about a warning so I could sell tickets.
Yeah.
It's just about time to start, but let me give you everything I know. Judy Cross is not here tonight because her SED rate is up 130, which is about 100 higher than it should be, so she's in a lot of pain. She has rheumatoid arthritis.
So what did you call it?
SED rate. That's a,
I was gonna ask the same thing, but I thought maybe I wasn't.
That's-
No, I don't know.
Pharmaceutical technique.
I told my doctors talk to me about.
that's a test that rheumatologists will give to determine whether the immune system is fighting and trying to destroy the body. And it should be down below 30, but it's 130. And so he gave her steroids, and she's home, and Dan's home with her. Isaac Coven has a sinus infection. Ron informs me that Everett Shackelford passed away. You know, it was Everett Shackelford, which is Katie Lloyd's grandfather. It was announced Sunday that all the Purcell congregation has been highly infected with the coronavirus. So he passed away. The other grandfather, we don't have any update on him yet. Florence is not here tonight. She's had a rough day, not only with pain, but also her oldest sister, Mary Farber, is not expected to live past tonight. So, yeah. Yeah, she came down with, or was diagnosed with congestive heart failure about a month and a half ago, and it's just been downhill ever since. So, the hospice, yeah, hospice nurse was there today and said that she didn't expect her to live past tonight. And if she does, then they're going to have several hospice nurses there tomorrow to take care of her so Jay can sleep. Let's see. Do I know of anything? Huh? He's doing all right. I spent some time with him today, and of course Florence went over there. We talked a little bit, and he said, you know, I've seen this coming on for about a year. Well, he's using a walker now and everything, but his health could be better than it is. But when you don't, when you spend 90% of your time sitting in a recliner and not doing any walking at all, you should not expect your health to stay well for a long period of time. But overall, he's doing well, and he probably should live a couple of more years. And he's taking it well with Mary because, she's in her mid-80s, I think, and I think he's around 88 or something like that. I mean, he does have some heart issues and everything. He gets tachycardia once in a while, so they have to watch his heart from that. But other than that, overall, he's doing pretty well. And it is. And,
Like that.
I'm talking to you. You're in good shape. You just stay that way.
I was bragging on you people that they're okay now. He is getting on it.
So let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Our most loving Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for the opportunity we have to come together to study Thy Word and to be able to do so without fear of persecution. We're thankful, Father, for each and every member of this congregation, for the encouragement that we can bring to each other. We're thankful, Father, for the many spiritual blessings you blessed us with, especially your Son who willingly died upon that cruel cross, that we might have everlasting life if we're faithful to thee. We ask, Father, that you be with our members who have physical ailments. We have a number due to age and poor health that's not able to get out. We ask that you'd be with them, but we have others also that has some physical ailments, and we ask that you'd be with them as well. And we ask that you'd be with Mary and Jay Farber as they are ending part of their lives together, and that they might be comforted. And we ask, Father, that you would use us as instruments, that we might reach out to our members, that we can be an encouragement to each and every member we have, that we can help in any way that we can. And we're thankful, Father, that we can study thy word in the book of Deuteronomy, to have a full understanding of how it applies to us in this day and time. And we ask, Father, that you be with us, that we might open our hearts to receive the truth and nothing but the truth, and that because of the things we study, we would be better able to teach and encourage others, that they might be able to recognize the need to serve you and to be baptized for the remission of their sins, so that they can look forward to that day that your Son comes again. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen. Okay, we're in the 15th chapter. We read verses 6 through 11 last week, or last Sunday. And I want to draw your attention to the words in red there. The poor will never cease out of the land. We talked a little bit about that last Sunday, but we're going to continue, and we're going to continue right here at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 10 through 12. And John, we're going to begin with you at the appropriate time, okay? Well, I wanted to give you time to look it up if you hadn't found it yet. So,
We had already discussed that.
no, we hadn't discussed 2 Thessalonians chapter 3.
No, we discussed
We discussed who was going to go first.
when you were out there.
What did I say now?
When you were
Yeah,
out there,
you
we
weren't even
discussed
here
who you
for
were
it.
gonna start with, and we thought you were gonna start with 15, 6 through 11. So he was ready for that.
Oh, well, we already read that. So,
That's what
The
we were
first time
discussing.
we read something the second time.
that's true, it isn't. But here's what I want you to think about. Moses is talking about what they should do to take care of the poor. That's what we read in verses 6 through 11. But what we want to see here, looking at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 10 through 12, is the fact that Paul told the church at Thessalonica that those who would be poor by choice, i.e. those who are lazy and those who are busybodies, were not to be helped in any way. Now keep in mind, he's talking to the church at Thessalonica, so we're talking about our brethren here. We're not talking about the outside world. But I think a lot of that applies to the outside world as well, because there are people who are just too lazy to work, and they're constantly asking for handouts. And sometimes we just have to take a strong stance and say no, because of the fact that we know that they could work if they wanted to. But let's look at what Paul had to say about the church here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 10 through 12, John.
For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread.
Now, so we see what Paul said to the church at Thessalonica about members, brethren, who were lazy and busybodies. Moses, very strongly in verses 6 through 11, commands Israel to open their wallets to the needy and not grudgingly. People in Moses' day, as well as our day, were to help the needy because they saw their needs and had empathy for them. Now I want to
Faithful people, though?
do what?
We're talking about the faithful, though.
Yes, that's what I was just about to say, Jack. I want to emphasize that Moses was talking to the Israelites. He wasn't talking about the fact that when they get into the land of Canaan, they should help everybody after they beat them up and and destroy their nations and their cities and all that. He wasn't talking about helping them. He was talking about helping their own brethren. Okay, John?
When they went into the promised land, they were supposed to eliminate everybody that was there.
That's
There
true.
was supposed to be nobody there that needed help.
Well, that's
There
true.
wasn't nobody left,
That's true.
but they didn't do that.
But these Israelites didn't know that just yet either. So
But there's a lot of those Israelites that weren't, a lot of those that weren't faithful.
that's true. That's very true. So the idea is then that this is a subject that is not talked about much in the church. However, one that needs to be considered because I think many times different congregations fail to see exactly what God has to say about the subject, and they do a little bit too much in the way of do what?
Benevolence.
Benevolence, yes, thank you. So many brethren go without because the wealthy have no concern for their needy brethren. It seems that Americans have a greater concern about helping the needy overseas more than they do within their own congregation. And our concern should be toward all who are in need. And I mean, it's just me and it's just a thought. Maybe it'll stir up some of your thoughts that you might want to share with us. But it seems that the church wants to support missionaries overseas. And yet when I look in the United States, I see a field here that is just begging for people to work here in the United States. And yet they choose to go overseas. I liken this to if we do it right and we really convert home first, then home will spread. Just as we read in the book of Acts, when Saul was crucifying and persecuting the Christians, what did the Christians do?
They were preaching the gospel.
They were scattered abroad preaching the gospel. And I think that as the church grows, then the church will preach the gospel and it will spread. It'd be similar to taking a ping pong table and putting mice traps, setting them side by side all the way across there and putting a ping pong ball on top of them and just put one ping pong ball and toss it out in there. And eventually every one of those mice traps will be activated. And that's what can happen in the church. And in fact, if you look at the book of Acts, which is considered to be the go book, that's exactly what you see as far as the evangelism taking place. Started with the Jews, and then it spread on to the Gentiles, and it continued to spread. And you had a lot of enthusiasm early on. You go back to the early days of the church here in the United States. You look at men like Marshall Keeble and others. They preached for hours, and people came, tent meetings, and there was huge crowds coming to hear the word preached. And today, we go out and we try to encourage people to come to a gospel meeting, and we can't even get them into the doors. We can't even get our own members into the door when we have a gospel meeting. And that's sad.
You gotta promise you'll heal them.
Do what?
You gotta promise you'll heal them.
Well, yeah, that's what some people want, yeah.
The gospel meetings.
Yeah. That's-
They have healers there.
That's exactly what some people want, yeah. So, anybody have any thoughts on what I just said? Or any disagreements? I'll accept disagreements.
I think a lot of those people that go overseas is for self-glory and a free trip. And then they enjoy the trips and go back.
That's
That's a lot of it.
that is a lot of it. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Always enjoy it.
Any other thoughts?
My next door neighbor went over there and he's stuck in a country that wasn't where he was going and he can't get it out.
Well, that happens too. All right, let's look at verses 12 through 14 then. I'm going to wake up. Here we go. A Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman is sold to you. Now, this is what Moses has to say on that subject. Ron, verses 12 through 14, please.
If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. And when you send him away free from you, you shall not let him go away empty-handed. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, from your winepress. From what the Lord your God has blessed you with, you shall give to him. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt,
So the point that Moses is making here to the Israelites is sometimes the Hebrews were unable to repay what was borrowed due to their extreme poverty. And in these such cases, it would enable the creditor to adopt the brother or his children as slaves to repay the debt. However, on the sabbatical year would be a year of release for those slaves or said slavery. Note the kindness that was to be displayed by the creditor to his brother that was enslaved to him. When the 7th year rolled around, the slave was to be released, and the master was to furnish him liberally with flocks, grain, and wine. As God had blessed the rich were to pass this blessing on to the poor. And we see examples of that in the New Testament where there are parables that criticize people because of their lack of concern for those who are poor. Yes, John?
You build them up so that way they may not be back into slavery.
True. That's the idea. Yes. So, all right. So let's look at verses 15 through 18. Chris, you feel like reading tonight?
You should remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this thing, that if it happens that he says to you, I will not go away from you, because he loves you and your house, as he prospers with you. And you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be your servant forever. Also your female servants you shall do likewise. And it shall not seem hard to you when you send them away free from you, for ye have been worth a double hired servant and serving you 6 years. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all that you do.
All right, thank you. So Israel was never to think too highly of themselves as their wealth multiplied. This goes all the way back to the 8th chapter of Deuteronomy, verse 17. At one point, they were all slaves in Egypt, and this is what Moses is reminding them. They were to remember those days that they may have the empathy for their current slaves. We as Christians today would all do well to remember days when things were not going so well for us, that we may help those who are in need today. Some slaves may develop such a love and dependency upon their masters that they do not wish to leave after 6 years of service. Those who desire to stay were to go through a ritual prescribed by God. Masters were to take an awl, i.e. a pointed tool for making holes, as in wood or leather, and they were to pierce the slave's ear through and impale him or her to the door of the house. It seems that this would signify their place in the master's house. Now that personally would discourage me from wanting to stay with my master if he's going to impale me. But that was the ritual then, and this is what God prescribed. Yes, John?
How long did they leave them there?
Well, not very long. And this is the other side of the coin. If, however, the slave decided to leave, the master was to obey the law of the sabbatical year and release the slave with the necessities of life, as we saw in the earlier verses. So the slave could be impaled and stay for a while, but then say, well, I really would like my freedom. And Moses is telling the Israelites that this has to be the case. Any thoughts through verse 18? All right, let's look at verses 19 through 23. Stephanie, you want to read that?
I'm going to try. I love my readers at home.
Well, if you don't feel like you can do it, I'll pass it on to Chuck.
Well, I'll try.
Okay, try it.
Okay. All the firstborn males,
Yes, you are there in the correct place.
all the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock you shall sanctify to the Lord your God. You shall do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household shall eat it before the Lord your God, year by year in the place which the Lord chooses. But if there is a defect in it, if it is lame or blind or has any serious defect, you shall not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You may eat it within your gates. The unclean and the clean person alike may eat it, as if it were a gazelle or a deer. Only you shall not eat its blood. You shall pour it on the ground like water.
All right, this goes back to Exodus, the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 12. Yes, John?
Did you say after they do that whole thing, he could leave if he wanted to?
Yeah.
As verse 17 says, and he shall be thy servant forever.
So read verse 18.
Is it in King James, does that make a difference?
No,
Okay.
no, because what he read was correct in verse 17, but read verse 18. So the way I read it, John.
I don't think it's talking about the same person.
Well, the way I read it is if the slave says that I want to stay with my master, he will be with his master forever unless he decides that he wants to leave. And then his master will honor him on that seventh year, just like the rest of
So he
them.
has to wait another 7 years.
Well, I don't know if he has to wait another 7 years, but I don't know when he might decide that he wants to leave. That's the way I see it. Anybody else see it differently?
Well, I read verse 18 with verse 13 and 14.
With 13 and 14?
Well, I mean, here's what you do, you send them away, but there's an exception to sending them away, and that is if they choose to stay. And if they choose to stay, then it's forever. But then verse 18 is going to be hard if you send them away.
Yeah.
That's what I was reading.
So what you see is that if they decide they want to stay, that they will have to stay forever?
Well, that's what, yeah, I don't see any place that, I don't see verse 18 saying they can leave
Okay,
after they decide.
okay. I won't disagree with that. I just,
Somebody else that says that.
yeah. I just thought maybe it might,
Yeah. Well, if it goes with verse 17, it would, but
well, that's the way I look at it, 18 going with 17, but I could be wrong.
Well, I look like 18 going before 17, and then 17, then for the guy that wanted to stay,
Yeah.
and then you go back to the ones that wanted to
Yeah.
leave.
And I wouldn't disagree with that.
That's the way I was reading.
Yeah, the whole point that we want to take from it is God expects them to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Whether they stay with their master or whether they leave, the master has to provide them enough so that they don't become slaves again, just as you mentioned. That's the way I look at it. But so either way you want to look at that, I don't have a problem with that. Any other thoughts?
I think the point is, when he says that it should not seem hard for you to send him away. That means you should give him, because you prospered, yes, you prospered while you had that slave from him. So you should willingly give him necessities to go with. That's the reason it shouldn't be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Thankful.
So anyway, in verses 19 through 23 then, Moses is reiterating the law that was given at Mount Sinai in Exodus, the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 12, which we're not going to take time to read that, Chuck. Because what we see in those verses is the firstborn animals were to be sanctified for the Lord. They were not to have any blemish of any kind. They were not to be used for work, and neither were they to be sheared. Those without blemishes were to be used. Those who were lame, blind, or ill, etc., were to be sacrificed to the Lord at the altar of burnt offering and eaten. Those without blemishes, I should say, not those with lame, blind, and ill. Those firstlings then that were blemished had no place at the altar of burnt offering. And the owner of the blemished firstling was to sanctify it unto the Lord and eat it within his own property, and not with the sacrifice to the Lord in the way of the unblemished animals. Any thoughts?
Sounds like the Lord chooses and while they're still young.
Yeah.
It says year by year, firstborn.
Well, the firstborn and the sacrifice, generally they were under a year of age. Yeah. Yeah. Any comments?
The question, what exactly, I took it that maybe what God chooses, I'm thinking it's probably in the tabernacle.
That's where his sacrifice, I mean, where they sacrificed was.
They keep saying what place where God chooses.
Right,
And,
yeah. I mean, if you look at what the Old Testament sacrifices are dealing with, you take that to the New Testament, and what's the sacrifice in the New Testament?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, and
Perfect,
our lives.
without blemish, without illness, without disease, without any ill effects of any kind. Jesus Christ was the perfect sacrifice. And this was the perfect sacrifice in the Old Testament. So.
And he was the firstborn male.
He was firstborn male. All right, let's look at the questions for chapter 15. Describe how the debts are canceled every 7 years. Yeah, it's obviously chapter 15 and verse 2. This is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Number 2, why did the Lord say there would be no poor among his people? Okay.
Well, there should be no poor among you, because you shall open your hand wide to him and lend to him willingly, sufficient for his needs, whatever he needs. I just lend to him and do not.
Yeah, verses 7 and 8.
Right, verse 7 and 8.
Yeah. Number 3, what was to be done if there was a poor brother among God's people?
He was to be cared for. He was to be living for needy.
Okay.
The same thing, you open your hand wide to your brother.
Yeah.
And you're needy in your land.
Verse 10 is what I wrote down. You shall surely give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him. Because of this thing, the Lord your God will bless you in all your works and in all to which you put your hand. Number 4, I ask you to complete this.
You just read it.
I put number 10 on that number 3.
I did just read it, didn't I?
I put 11 on verse question 3.
You put-
Because 10 is number 4.
Yeah. Yeah. But you put number 11?
On 3. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that certainly is true too. Number 5 then. Finish the verse. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman,
He sold you 6 years, 70 shall let you go free.
okay. Number 6, what is to be done with the slave that loves his master and does not want to leave?
Nail him to the wall.
Nail him to the wall. Yeah, nail him to the wall.
You don't need to shut the door till he's stuck there.
Maybe all of us that have son-in-laws should do that to our son-in-laws.
Really?
Well, you can't leave.
Well, you won't leave that way.
That will keep you.
All right, let's look at chapter 16. I'm glad.
Don't let it leave. You might just nail to the door.
All right, in chapter 16, observance of 3 set feasts wherein all male Jews were required to attend annually is what we're going to see in chapter 16, okay? So let's read verses 1 through 8, Chuck.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. Therefore you shall sacrifice the Passover to the Lord your God, from the flock and the herd in the place where the Lord chooses to put his name. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it, that is, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste, that you may remember the day in which you came out of the land of Egypt, all the days of your life. And no leaven shall be seen among you in all your territory for 7 days. nor shall any of the meat which you sacrifice the first day at twilight remain overnight until morning. You may not sacrifice the Passover within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you. But at the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide, there you shall sacrifice the Passover at twilight, at the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the time you came out of Egypt. And you shall roast and eat it in the place where the Lord your God chooses, and in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a sacred assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it.
Okay, so the Passover was to mark the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year. Now, the 14th of Abib was marked as a Passover feast. Let's see, let's go back and look. Jack, look at Exodus chapter 12 and verse 2 for me, please.
This month shall be your beginning of month. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
And then chapter 23, verse 15, Pat, of Exodus.
15 says, if I write it, you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty.
All right. The 14th of Abib was marked as a Passover feast. Look at Leviticus 23, verses 4 and 5, Donna.
These are the appointed times of the Lord, holy consultations, which you shall proclaim at the time appointed for them. In the 5th month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight is the Lord's Passover.
Okay, so the 14th of Abib. That would be the 14th day, right? What is Abib? It's something a little baby wears. Something as we get older, we older ones should wear. Abib is actually March or part of March and part of April. Okay?
The Babylonian calendar is the month of the barley ripening in the first month of spring.
Yeah, it's either March or part of March and part of April. It was only to last 1 week. That's the answer to your first question, Deuteronomy 16, verse 1. Okay? So, upon this day, Israel would sacrifice an unblemished lamb in the evening and eat its flesh with no leaven. It is termed bread of affliction, due to the fact that Israel would be caused to remember their haste out of Egypt by the mighty hand of God, as well as the affliction they suffered there while they were there. Go back to Exodus, the 12th chapter, and John, if you'd read verse 11 and then verse 39 for me. I don't have that up there, do I?
Yeah. And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded and your shoes on your feet and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover.
And verse 39.
And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought forth out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any virtue.
Okay. Now, the next 6 days were to be spent eating unleavened bread, which was known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This feast began 1 day after the Passover, Leviticus 23 and verse 6. I will not take time to read that one. The 7th day would be a holy convocation unto the Lord. The sacrificed lamb was to be sacrificed at God's specified place. Later it would be at the temple in Jerusalem. The lamb was to be eaten that night and not allowed to sit out all night. It seems that Exodus 34:25 infers that the flesh will begin the rotting process overnight and thereby produce leaven, which, if in contact with other foods, will act as a fermenting catalyst. Let's go and just read Exodus 34, verse 25.
You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, nor shall the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover be left until morning.
Now, that's the only reason I suggested what I suggested, is that if the flesh was allowed to sit overnight, then there would be some fermentation that would possibly take place, and they were specifically instructed not to use any leavening. Any comments through verse 8 then?
Does it coordinate with the unleavened bread that Christ requires also?
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole idea of the Passover was to remind them, remember they put the blood over the doorpost so that the firstborn would not be sacrificed, but if the blood was not there, the firstborn would be killed. They left hastily. God told them not to take any leavening with them, because leavening takes time to, as you know, if you bake bread, it takes time. And so no leavening was used. If you look at the Nazirite vow, what do we know about the Nazirite vow?
Couldn't have anything left. It couldn't drink wine because it had fermented, if it fermented.
Yeah, could not drink any leavening or take any leavening. And so I say that, and I know I could probably get myself in trouble, but you go back to when his mother told him to that they had no wine to drink. You'd have to say that if Jesus was a Nazirite, then he would be a hypocrite if he produced alcoholic wine for them to drink.
There you go.
So that's just something to consider there, because the unleavening was designed to help them, or to, I'll use the word force them to remember the quick exit that they took out of Egypt. Okay?
I thought that was only during Passover.
Do what?
I thought that was only during Passover.
The unleavening? Yeah. But the Nazirite vow,
What's it got to do with Jesus to make him mind over?
Jesus was a Nazirite, and he had to take the Nazirite vow.
And they could have no wine.
I thought it was only during
I
Passover.
don't think
No.
he was a Nazarite, he was a Nazarene.
Well, he was Nazarene, yeah.
He was a
But he was
Nazarene.
dedicated
That's true.
to God. I don't know if it's kind
People
of,
in Van had to come all the way down into Judea wherever the tabernacle was.
Well, the tabernacle, it's right here in Jerusalem, yeah.
Yeah, eventually it was, but I mean, it was all around the
Before they entered into the promised land, yeah.
Yeah, even after it wasn't still up. David brought it to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It wasn't in Jerusalem until David brought it there.
Right.
But they had to come all the way up from Dan all the way down to where it was at.
Well, and you remember when they had the divided kingdoms? You remember
All the way before the divide.
I know. But that was what that one king said, is let's build some tabernacles up here so you don't have to go all the way down there.
That's what I'm saying. But they had to go all the way down there while Saul was king.
Yeah.
Every year for the Passover and a couple other feasts.
Yeah.
A lot of time traveling.
Very true.
And
Very
all
true.
this was only during Passover meal, with Passover meal.
The unleavened bread, yeah. Yeah. And so when Jesus instituted the Passover, the Lord's Supper, yeah.
I think there was 4 feasts they had to come down to the tabernacle for.
3 were all the Jews.
Where everybody had.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing here in chapter 16, is 3.
People in one small area.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, let's look at verses 9 through 12. Where are we? Chris?
You should count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grave. And you shall keep the feast of weeks to the Lord your God, and distribute a free will offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. You shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, the and a widow who are among you, at the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name alive. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes.
So Moses is giving instructions for observance of 50 days after the Passover, which was the Feast of Weeks, going back to Exodus, the 34th chapter, verse 22. But also look at Acts, the 2nd chapter, Stephanie, verses 1 through 4.
I was in the other one.
Do what?
I was in the other one.
I'm sorry. I want you to read more than one verse.
When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance.
Okay, so the 50th day after the Feast of Weeks, this annual feast was at the year's end, going back to Exodus 34 and verse 22. The 50 days after Passover is a time of harvest. God's people were not to harvest the corners of their fields, just as we've read before, nor gather fruit that had dropped from the trees, but rather leave those areas for the poor. And they were to begin the season of Pentecost with a wave offering of the first fruits of the land to indicate their thankfulness for the harvest. They were to offer up a burnt offering, a meal offering, and a drink offering. At the end of the 50 days, they were to have a holy convocation then, in which no work was to be done. They would then offer a meal offering. They would offer burnt offerings, and they would offer the drink offerings, the sin offerings, the peace offerings, and a wave offering. The 50th day after the Passover was to be a day of holy convocation. That's in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verses 9 through 22. Let's go ahead and read that, Chuck. I know you can handle that much.
And the Lord spake to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give to you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priests. Ye shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer on that day, when you wave the sheaf, a male lamb of the first year, without blemish, as a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to the Lord, or a sweet aroma, and its drink offering shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. You shall eat neither bread nor parched grain nor fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generation in all your dwellings. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath, and you shall offer a grain offering to the Lord. You shall bring from your dwellings 2 wave loaves of tenths of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to the Lord. And you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs of the first year without blemish, 1 young bull, 2 rams. They shall be as a burnt offering to the Lord, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, and an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs of the first year as a sacrifice of a peace offering. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Lord, with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation to you. You shall do no customary work on it, It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. When you reap the harvest of the land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field when you reap, nor shall you gather any gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
All right, so that completes verses 9 through 12. The 50th day after the Passover was to be a day of holy convocation. So what we'll do is we'll finish chapter 16. Sunday, we'll begin with verse 13. I appreciate your comments. Anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Pat?
Does convocation mean dedication? I mean, what's that mean? Holy convocation. Is it like a dedicated day?
It is a day set aside for the Lord, yes.
So it probably means, I couldn't know.
It's not their worship.
Well, yeah. Any other comments? All right, well, that was our second bell, so I guess we have to adjourn.
We gotta go.
Yeah, we gotta go.